The Law of Success in 16 Lessons by Napoleon Hill. This book was released in 1928, and the original work, The Law of Success, was released in 1925, and it was actually 15 different books. So we're going to talk about the 16 lessons, the 16 laws of success, as Napoleon Hill calls them. And it's important to understand that these are the principles behind success in whatever area you choose to achieve success in. Okay? Doesn't matter. And, in whatever area you choose to master, there are the elements required to achieve mastery, the technical skills, or the fundamentals in that area. These are meta concepts, concepts that drive you to become even better in those specific elements. So you know what they are. If it's business, fitness, whatever area of choice that you want to gain mastery in, any area that you want to find success in, these principles can be utilized or developed to help you get that success faster. They can be very helpful. So Napoleon Hill has condensed it into 16 lessons, and we're going to talk about that in this video. Now, I'm going to share my viewpoints and experiences on each of the 16 lessons, which is going to help you further understand and add more dimension as you study this book. And like with many books that I cover on this channel, it's a book worth rereading multiple times at different stages of your life, because the truth is that no matter what level of success you've achieved, you can always get better at understanding and implementing these 16 principles. Every time I read a book like this, I feel like I'm reading it for the first time. Because as I increase the success in my chosen areas, I recognize that there are so many areas that I need to improve on. And one of the mistakes that we can make that prevent us from learning even further, from growing even further, is to convince ourselves that we already know these concepts. For example, if I was to tell you what these 16 lessons are, they could seem very obvious and very pragmatic. But the truth of the matter is that we can always get better at improving in these areas. And every now and then it's important to recalibrate our focus. Recalibrate our focus on what is important. I made a video called Essentialism. I recommend that you watch that based on the book Essentialism. Once you determine what it is you want to achieve, it's important to understand the components that make up that. And then remove yourself from all the areas that don't provide any value and focus with presence and awareness on the areas that do matter. And when it comes to principles of success, these are the areas that matter, these 16 lessons which we're going to talk about. So before we do that, let's a little introduction, a quote that I pulled from the book that I thought was very revealing. No man has a chance to enjoy permanent success until he begins to look in a mirror for the real cause of all his mistakes. What this means is that your success, or lack thereof, is for the most part determined by you. Now, there's things that are beyond your control, but you have far more within your control than you are even aware of right now. So it's important to develop the awareness and to really look at yourself, to gauge yourself, to analyze yourself, to study yourself as to what you respond to, why you do what you do, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what are the areas of whatever it is you want to achieve mastery in, and break it down into its components and subcomponents, and dedicate as much time as you can, if possible, 24 hours a day. You're probably thinking, how do you dedicate 24 hours a day when you need to sleep? Well, you could even be conscious about your sleep, and you could improve your sleep. And I'm talking about dedicating all your time to improving those areas that you need to improve on that help you get the success that you want. So it all starts within yourself. It's important to look at yourself, not look at others, and be concerned with what others are doing. You can model after people, and you can learn from observing people what to do and what not to do. But it's way more important to look at yourself. and study your positive aspects or your negative aspects and develop those areas. The most successful men and women on earth have had to correct certain weak spots in their personalities before they began to succeed. The most outstanding of these weaknesses, which stand between men and women and success, are as follows: intolerance, cupidity, greed, jealousy, suspicion, revenge, egotism, conceit, the tendency to reap where they have not sown, and the habit of spending more than they earn. It's important that you write these down and you go back to the other quote that I just mentioned and reflect upon where you have these qualities, where they show up in your life. And then understand why they show up, where they come from. Is it stories from your past situations? And then, get really granular on the specific things that you need to do. Create this mind map of all these specific areas, and then say, how do I develop these areas? But first, before that, identify where they show up in your life. Okay? Does greed show up in not just monetary greed, but other kinds of value-based greed? For example, maybe you feel that you should get a lot of attention from people, and you do things because you want attention from people. To me, that's a form of greed. The only attention that we should really go after is the kind of attention that is marketing, that is designed to help us project our value back to the marketplace. Anything beyond that is really excessive. Now, this doesn't mean you can't get a lot of admiration, or in the money sense, it doesn't mean you should not get a lot of money. But if you want to have this to be a lifelong goal, then I'm of the opinion that the more money you make, the more you should take and reinvest that back in yourself and others to generate even more. That's how you get continuous success. You get it by investing. There's a difference between making a lot of money to reinvest back in yourself and in contribution than to make money to make yourself feel good and do it at the expense of others, and constantly looking ways that you could work the system to get more money. See the difference? And each of these have specific aspects where they show up in our lives, and we want to develop it. For example, egotism, very related. We want to do things because we want to look good. We want to be the cool ones. Instead of looking at it and saying, I want to do things because I want to contribute more value. I want to make this more about my market, the people that I serve, my purpose. And I'll get validation, and people will say, hey, your stuff is great. Thank you. But remember, they're not really thanking you because of you and your ego. They're thanking you because you're helping them realize certain aspects within themselves. You're helping them get the results that they want. And their thanks is not to please your ego. It is to indicate to you that they would like you to amplify the value that you're giving them. They're enjoying your stuff. They're getting great value out of it, and they want more of it. Not in a way that, they're trying to drain the life out of you, but they're giving you valuable data, market insight, as to the areas that you can focus on more so that you can create more value, but then you'll get more in return, which again, then you could reinvest back. You can see how this all feeds off each other. So, take a note of these things and work on them. So let's talk about the 16 lessons. Number 1 is the mastermind principle. Mastermind principle. So some takeaways, and this is the format that I'm going to do, is we're going to cover 3 insights that I've gathered personally that weren't necessarily quotes from the book in relation to the 16 principles to add more dimension and maybe shift your perspective a little bit beyond what was covered in the book. So I recommend reading the book, studying the book, gathering your own insights, and then reflecting upon the insights that I've shared or I'm sharing with you, because these are the insights that I've gathered over the years of working with this information. Model after the greats. So essentially what we're looking for is, what are the characteristics that we want to develop? Do we want to become better at communication? Do we want to become better at sales? Do we want to become better at building systems in business? Who out there has those skills within your awareness? And how can you get access to them? Okay. Remember, those that are at really high levels are probably very hard to access because they value their time, and their time is involved in certain activities that produce the greatest output, the greatest value. And they're not always open to hang out and have general conversations. So you've got to be clear and you've got to be specific. So even though you don't have access to certain people, you could still study them from afar. You could read their books, and you could observe what they do and how they respond to people and how they carry themselves and different aspects of who they are. And you can learn to model them after the characteristics that you want to acquire. This doesn't mean you want to be like them. This just means that you're clear on what you want to develop, and you're looking for people that have those skills, and you're looking as to why, how, what, where, when, all those elements. They do what they do, and you study it and you integrate it into yourself. Now, the mastermind principle essentially is about building a mastermind, surrounding yourself with people that you want to collaborate with to further develop your skills, but then also you can contribute too. It's important to contribute to others while you're receiving value from them. Okay, and when you're contributing value, you have to see it that from their perspective, what they consider to be valuable. You can't tell them what value is. You have to understand what they see as value. And when you have a match, you have a mastermind. Okay, and the mastermind doesn't necessarily have to be a formal mastermind in which you call it a mastermind. Yes, it can be, and you can be very conscious of a mastermind. However, the mastermind is really people that you associate with, your friends, your family, your colleagues, your partners, etc. Everybody that you associate with is, in a way, your mastermind. And everybody that you are associating with is influencing you. And influencing you in a way that they essentially would like you to be a certain way, and you would like them to be a certain way, because they feel it's best for you and you feel it's best for them. However, the distortion lies when it's not the kind of personality that you want to integrate. You associate with people that don't have the kind of personality that you want to associate, or the characteristics that you want to associate into you. And likewise, the same way, the other way around. Okay, you to them. So it's important to be conscious as to where your awareness is going. Because like I said, everybody's influencing you. And a lot of times people aren't aware that they are influencing you. And influencing is not a negative thing. It's not a manipulative thing, although sometimes it can be. It's just that as a human species, we're constantly influencing each other because we're trying to find our position and our contribution and the value that we create in the world. And we believe that our way is the best way. And it's important to you to determine what is best for you, what is the most valuable for you, and who are the kind of people that can help you build in those areas that you find that you want to develop. The next is to bring concrete value to the group. I mentioned this earlier. A lot of times we think that what we consider to be value is what's valuable for everyone else. You know, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And that's not always necessarily the case. A lot of times it's not. So you see, what is valuable to another person is what they believe is valuable, not what you say is valuable. You can persuade someone to see things from a different perspective and then help them re-understand what really value means, or get clear, I should say. You can help somebody get clarity. But it can be a lot of work if you're trying to convince someone to see what you do as valuable, or see what you have to offer as valuable. It's not a kind of game that I want to play. What I'm really looking for is people that have the need for certain kind of value that I offer. Let's use this YouTube channel. I discuss very specific topics on here, and I discuss it from a certain perspective. This is not for everyone else. My videos are very different. I do an hour and a half discussions. And those that are interested in reflecting along with me on this information will be drawn to my videos. I'm not lecturing here. I am reflecting with you. Okay, and I've learned to understand that is the value, along with many other elements that I provide on this channel. And when I'm dealing with my clients, when I'm in personal life and just people in general, in various businesses, various industries, value means something totally different. Okay? But the pinnacle is to ensure that I'm bringing concrete value to the group, that I'm learning what is value to the other person, and that I'm bringing that. Next is avoiding the snares of groupthink. What happens when you get a bunch of people together is groupthink starts to form. Okay? You can see this in some kind of in some mastermind groups, business mastermind groups. The objective is to build the business, but when you get a lot of people together that don't necessarily have the business skills, they might come up with ideas that unknowingly self-sabotage them as a group, because they don't know what they don't know. And unless there's somebody in that group that knows what they don't know, chances are they're going to come up with an idea or strategies and so forth that might not work. And, unknowingly so. However, it can be kind of tricky to be aware of that we don't know that what we don't know, and place ourselves in a situation where we can acquire that kind of knowledge, the knowledge of what we don't know that we don't know. And one of the best ways to acquire that knowledge is to ensure that within our group we have a diverse group of people, and people that have achieved levels of mastery that are greater than ourselves in certain areas. Because, it doesn't have to necessarily mean that you're surrounding yourself or placing yourself in a mastermind with one person in the group who has a radical amount of success. It could be that different people have different concepts that they're very good at towards that level of mastery. And you recognize who's got the strengths and who's got the weaknesses, and you work with that group dynamic from that perspective. Okay, this is a more conscious way of working with a mastermind. This can reduce the likelihood of groupthink, which is not what we want. Okay, groupthink is something that is worth studying and understanding. I'm just being general here. 33 Strategies of War, they talk about this, and many other books on the subject of groupthink. But what we want is to develop, and we want the group to develop. And a lot of time that involves changing the paradigm. But if everybody agrees that they came up with a solution in the existing paradigm, there could be a possibility that that's not a valid or a beneficial solution or a strategy or whatever. Okay, mastermind. There's some reflections I got on that. Next is a definite chief aim. A single, clear-cut, and measurable / concrete chief aim with ever-realizing awareness of the supporting elements. Okay. Now, what does this mean? This can seem kind of dense. Well, a single clear cut, you have to know exactly what it is that you are trying to achieve. The clearer you are, the more specific you are. We're talking numbers and measurables. And that's concrete. That's based in reality. Okay? Concrete reality. The better it is, the better all this stuff is going to work. Because if you watch my video on psycho-cybernetics, I recommend you do watch that video. We talk about that in order for cybernetics to work, we need to know where we're going. We have governors within ourselves. We have guidance systems within ourselves. But we need to be clear, because when we're clear, we're going to know how to make decisions. And in this world, you have to be able to make rapid decisions, fast decisions. because the world is moving really fast right now. Okay? Way faster than before. And depending on what business you're in, it could be even faster. But if you don't have a clear-cut, measurable, and concrete chief aim, then it's going to be harder for you to calibrate. Now, what if you don't have that right now? Let's say you're just starting out in business. Well, actions create clarity. The more actions you take, the clearer you become. Don't expect to be ridiculously, insanely clear overnight. Super clear. It could take a while. It could take, I get clear over the years, over the months, over the days, because I put my emphasis on these principles. The more actions you take, and the more actions you take based on 80-20 principle and highest and best use, the clearer you're going to become. And then your goals are going to get even more specific, clear, measurable. You have to be able to measure it. Okay? There has to be some kind of numbers or stats. If it's health and fitness, how much do you want to increase your lifts by, for example? And are you tracking that progress? We should be measuring ourselves and making sure that we make incremental improvements every single week. That's an example. Next, ensuring that all physical, mental, and emotional possessions are contributing to your chief aim. So this is where minimalism comes in. And my concept, my view of minimalism is not to reduce things just for the sake of reducing things. I believe in owning, consuming, partaking in emotions, mentally engaging activities and things and so forth, possessions that are only contributing towards my chief aim. And by the way, I'm going to go back here to discuss this a little bit more. Awareness of the supporting elements. Okay, in your chief aim, there are supporting elements. For example, if you want to achieve a certain financial, concrete, number-based business goal, okay, you want to make, let's say, $30,000 a month. Understand that there's many aspects of achieving that goal: physical, mental, and emotional. Everything from not just building a business or doing whatever you do if it's sales, but your relationships, your health, your fitness, all those elements that support that, what are they? Essentially, your chief aim is not this chief aim that is just for the sake of having a chief aim. It's something that grows you, that builds you up, that contributes to others, that overall levels you up in many areas of your life. Okay? Once you recognize that, you start to see that there's a lot of things within our physical, mental, and emotional awareness that are not contributing to our chief aim, and a lot of times pushing us away from our chief aim. So we need to figure out what those things are, and we need to remove things that are not beneficial from our lives. Next, dedicating 24 hours each day towards your chief aim. Okay, when I say 24 hours, I'm talking about conscious rest and sleep. I'm talking about engaging in conversations and consuming information that is helping you move forward. I'm talking about all the realms of your life, relationships, health, fitness, spirituality, business, all the areas that are important, that are elements of your definite chief aim. Working on those areas, being in those areas, studying in those areas, doing in those areas so you can improve in all those areas, because we're after success here. Okay, we want to get results. And if you want to increase your results, then it's not rocket science to understand that the more time you dedicate, and not just dedication in a lot of time doing busy work, but value work, okay, essentialist work in those areas, the higher the likelihood you're going to achieve success. But you're also going to develop some of these other skills like self-confidence, self-control. You're going to learn a lot of things when you do this. And, you're also looking after that. I'm not talking about, sleep for 8 hours a day and just work the rest. I'm talking about looking at all areas like rejuvenating yourself, sparking your creativity, but being conscious, okay, living by design. Again, my video on essentialism, the book, watch that, living by design. Next is self-confidence, not comparing yourself to others, instead being inspired by them, comparing yourself to who you were yesterday, okay, who you were yesterday. We need to look at where we want to go, the kind of elements we want to integrate. But understand that you're never going to be like anyone else. You are only you, and you wouldn't want to be like everyone else because you already know a lot of elements of their story, and you want to discover your own story. You want to live your own passion because there's far more enjoyment in building yourself up than trying to be like someone else. You're going to learn to appreciate yourself in this journey, and you're going to see that everything you've ever wanted is within yourself, no matter what your situation is. And comparing yourself to where you were yesterday, if you dedicate 24 hours a day, including conscious sleep and really focusing on the elements towards your definite chief aim, you're going to make improvements, most likely, unless you're doing the wrong things. And you can look at yourself yesterday, you can compare yourself to the metrics of yesterday and say, wow, you're making progress. And based on that, you can clearly see when you're going to hit your chief aim. Okay, that's what it's about. But you're able to do that if you look back on yourself and you see the progress that you've made. Comparing yourself to others, not from a perspective of, comparing yourself to others in general where you feel that you're not good enough is just going to set you back. However, looking at where they're at in those specific elements and then seeing the progress you're making and working with them as a source of inspiration and guidance and mentorship, that's where the power is. Self-confidence also is associating with those that raise your self-confidence and not lower it. People with a it's possible, win-win, and interdependent modus operandi. Okay, reflect upon that. It's possible, win-win. Okay, Stephen R. Covey talks about thinking win-win. And interdependent. I'm going to talk about interdependent later in this video. But associating with those that have high self-confidence rubs off on you. Okay, their energy, when you put yourself in an environment where the energy is of self-confidence, you will rise up. Or if you've never been around self-confident, highly self-confident people, you might find yourself being uncomfortable around self-confident people. Okay, they might have too much self-confidence, in which case it's important to then understand that the reason why you feel uncomfortable around self-confident people is because you aspire to be like them and you're comparing yourself to them. So, just relax, let go, and feed off the energy. Observe them, study them, see what makes them the way they are. Take notes, go to work on it. Making daily incremental improvements, applying progressive overload while being aware, change that, of quantum leap opportunities. A good book that I recommend reading is called U Squared by Bryce Pritchett. It's a very small book, and he talks about, and he has another book called The Quantum Leap Strategy. You see, incremental improvements are important, but it could take us very long to achieve our definite chief aim if we just focus on incremental improvements. Every now and then, there's an opportunity to accelerate our growth rapidly. It could be a seminar, a program, a certain book, or certain actions that you take that bumps up your progress to high levels, sometimes even overnight. Okay, those that achieve financial wealth, for example, big financial wealth, have to make quantum leaps at some point if they're starting out with nothing. Okay, let's say they started out with, being broke. In order for them to get results, they could incrementally increase their wealth, but it could take too long. Or there could be some opportunities that they're aware of that exist in the marketplace, maybe arbitrage-based opportunities, pricing inconsistencies, I don't know. Some kind of opportunities where they execute upon right away and then it bumps up their wealth really high. It might not happen all the time. It could happen once in a while. But you got to stay ready, right? Because there's that saying, if you're ready all the time, you don't have to get ready. So that's what this is about, okay? Lessons of success. Now, when you value incremental improvements and you understand that quantum leaps do happen, you're going to feel a lot more calm. You're going to measure yourself up to who you were yesterday, as I mentioned. And you're going to recognize that once in a while, you're going to get some opportunity that comes your way that's going to bump you up, level you up. And I realize that from my own experience of being on this journey for many years now. This is the case. And it's the case with a lot of people that I know, everyone that I know that has been consistent on this journey. Now, some people I know come across some mind-blowing opportunity that just, boom, they just take that quantum leap and they are many steps higher than I ever thought they would be, that they ever thought they would be. That happens. That could happen to you. So we have to be aware of it. The habit of saving. Practice the saving and investing mindset with all resources. Okay, so it's not just about money, but it's also about all the resources that you have. Okay, you're investing with people. You are saving and conserving energy. Okay, there are certain exercises, for example, that you could do that produce far more value than long workouts. Like, for example, and this is a personal choice, I switched to sprinting versus long distance running. I find I get more value out of it based on what I want to achieve. And it's great. And arguably, people can say that it, provides even more value as far as health and fitness, cardiovascular health, than long distance running. Long distance running could take me 60 minutes a day, whereas sprinting could take me 15 minutes a day. And I get far more value of it. Okay, I'm essentially saving time there, and I'm reinvesting that time into other things that are important, but I'm getting far more output based on what I want. Investing in that which contributes and in the lives of others, okay, which contributes towards your chief aim, okay, in time, energy, resources, towards your chief aim, and in the lives of others. That's where you get a lot of gratification. And when you invest in the lives of others, I can't explain it. Somehow it comes back to you. We don't always know how. But that's not why we do it. We do it because that's how you find happiness and peace within. But it comes back to you. Developing your ability to resist the instant gratification actions. Instant gratification actions. The quick fix solution. The quick tactic. The quick take a pill and you'll lose 10 pounds in a week method. Those things might work, maybe work, but it's not the best place to place your bet. Because if you do that, you are further validating the lack of ability to save and invest. We want to develop the investor mindset. Okay, investor mindset. Investing is a mindset. And once you have that mindset, it flows through your actions. So we have to look at ways that we can develop the investor mindset. And one of the ways is to delay instant gratification. You could do this with many things. For example, you're on your way home after a night out and you have a choice. You could have the burger and fries, or you could have the healthy meal that you have waiting for you that you have prepped at home, or you could make a healthy choice at a restaurant. Instant gratification is go with the unhealthy meal. The return on that investment could be days of undoing your fitness progress. Or you could go down the healthy route. You can eat the healthy meal. Feel better about yourself afterwards, knowing that you are developing your self-control, your willpower, and that you are investing in your future. And the return on that is the next few days you feel great. You know you're on progress, and over the course of the weeks and months to come, you eventually hit your fitness goal. Same thing applies with business, right? Instant gratification. Do you buy things right now because you've made some money that will give you instant gratification, instant validation right now? Or do you find the joy, the great pleasure, and the happiness in developing lack of instant gratification, I'd say, or the habit of saving and investing, and you reinvest that into future growth, and that makes you feel good? You see, many things in our lives, we can rewrite the meaning. Many people just operate life by default. They just look at what everyone else is doing, and if everyone else is doing instant gratifications, and a lot of people are doing it in many different areas of their life, they'll just do it because, hey, everyone else is doing it. And that's the meaning. And then they feel good about it in the short term, and in the long term, they don't feel great about it because, it doesn't take a rocket science to understand that if you partake in habits that are based on instant gratification, chances are, over the long term, you're not going to do well. health, fitness, business, many areas of your life, relationships. However, if you look at the small few people that you model and that you're part of in your mastermind, for example, you'll see that a lot of them have the ability to delay instant gratification. They're willing to step back, take a step back, and evaluate the decision they're going to make, and look and see how the long-term implications play out, and then make that decision according to that, as that right there builds self-confidence. If you want to build self-confidence, if you want to increase your self-confidence, then practice delaying instant gratification. Practice delaying instant gratification. Because that will show you that you have control over yourself. And that's what self-confidence is. Developing that kind of willpower. Next is initiative and leadership. So I have a very important philosophy when it comes to leadership. That is one of my pinnacle philosophies that I learned. It's called the you go first philosophy. And that is that when I'm leading up teams or doing anything in business where I'm managing people or I'm doing any type of management consulting or anything like that, I make sure that I'm going first and that I'm doing or have done the things that I'm saying. And I'm leading by example. For example, if I was to set up a meeting in a company with getting a whole bunch of team members together and we have action items, I'm going to be the one that sends out the meeting request first. I'm going to be the one that is first in the meeting within a reasonable time, shows up on time. I'm going to be the one taking notes, sending out the email, holding people accountable. And after a period of time, then I'm going to pass that responsibility on to someone else. That's more likely to stick than being the kind of leader that comes into the room, even if you are the title holder of leader or manager or whatever, and expecting that others will do it for you. There's something very powerful about being the person that goes first and being the example. And Gandhi said it best, be the change. There's a reason why. You go first philosophy. Next, be a leader in macro and micro elements. Great leaders aren't just these ones with the high-level concepts. They're also masterful in the micro elements in their lives. Now you look around, you'll see a lot of leaders that are good at the macro level. They can give great strategy, but their life is falling apart and they don't have control of their life. Guess what? You think their team members really respect them? Can you really respect someone that, and you don't have to be perfect, you just have to be cognizant and making improvements in those areas. Okay, that is you go first. And we really respect someone that lives the philosophy that they preach. And I try to be that way because I recognize that it helped me a lot with the business initiatives that I do. Okay? That's how I get respect from those that I work with. And I pass that along to them because I want them to do the same thing. I want them to be leaders also. Assuming responsibility with boundaries. So I believe in assuming responsibility for everything that happens in your life. But you only get 24 hours a day. You only get a certain amount of time, energy, and resources. So you can't possibly do everything. Okay? So you got to know how to take responsibility and what areas you shouldn't work on that are beyond your control, beyond your ability. Okay? I think a lot of people have a hard time with this one, is they can assume responsibility and just keep taking responsibility and keep taking responsibility to the point where they're drained. They're not really looking after themselves. You have to know where you draw boundaries. And drawing boundaries is an act of assuming responsibility. But it's being clear-cut with the people where you draw the boundaries. Next is imagination. Value multiplier thinking. This is the concept that I thought about when I took these notes in this part of the book. Imagination. Having the imagination, essentially most of us, definite chief aim, let's use business or career-based goals. You're going to make far more money. You're going to get far more value as far as positioning, as far as rising up in the company, based on the kind of value that you put out, yes, and then your ability to figure out how to multiply that value using technology, using certain kinds of methods, working with a team. How do you multiply the value dedicating as much time in your imagination to look for opportunities, to figure out, to visualize how to multiply value. Becoming fascinated by the unfascinating elements of your chief aim. Now, there are many aspects to your definite chief aim that you might not like doing, that you might not like mastering. And what a lot of people do is they avoid those areas. They ignore them, even if they're required to achieve their definite chief aim. And what do you think happens? They either struggle to achieve their definite chief aim, or they'll never achieve their definite chief aim. Now, because we can create meaning in things, it's important to understand that we can become fascinated by things we're not fascinated about right now. We can do that. That's a very powerful ability to be able to do that. For example, health and fitness. A lot of people don't like eating a certain way because they feel it's stressful. But then I know a lot of people that are in great shape, have amazing health and fitness, but they really enjoy the healthy foods. They find great passion in eating these really healthy foods that a lot of people wouldn't find passion in. If you start to dig deeper as to why, you'll find out that a lot of us need highly intense kind of stimulus before we find enjoyment. And what they've done is they've learned to value nuance. They could take a little bit of sugar and put it in their whatever it is that they're having to sweeten it a bit. And they will really consume what they're consuming with presence and being aware of the subtle energies and the subtle tastes and find value in the nuance. And that can be more gratifying to them than someone who has 15 tablespoons of sugar in their soft drink and they drink that and that doesn't even seem sweet anymore. But the effects of that is essentially messing up their progress. Okay? There are ways, and that's just an example, of how to become fascinated by elements within your chief aim that you are not fascinated by. I always admire people that can do this, and I model after them. Okay? Because I recognize that when I started out in business, there was a lot of things I did not like to do. And now, every aspect of business I am fascinated by because I became fascinated by them. And as a result, my overall progress is better. My overall results is better. My overall passion to dedicate 24 hours a day towards developing myself and working towards my chief aim is a lot more flowing and with ease. Okay? What are the elements that you need to develop that you're not fascinated by towards your chief aim, and figure out ways that you can become fascinated by them so that you can enjoy the process. Look, you're going to have to go through the hours in the day. You have a choice of whether you go through it in flow state or you're going to do it in a way where it's going to seem stressful. One's going to leave you tired at the end of the day, and one's going to leave you excited to the point where you don't even want to go to sleep. Realizing that all truths are but half-truths. This is an important thing. What does this mean? Comes from the Kabbalion, actually. The 7 Hermetic Principles. All truths are but half-truths. What this means is that in your imagination, you've got to keep an open mind. And as sure you are about something, there's probably a situation where that's not true. Okay, think about it. There's a lot of things that we hold to be absolute and true, but if you really think about it, in situations that might not be true, that might not be valid. This allows us to keep an open mind. This doesn't mean that we're flimsy. It just means that we're keeping an open mind because we want our imagination to soar into unknown areas. We want to tap into what we don't know that we don't know. Enthusiasm. Beware of the unenthusiastic and with seemingly objective viewpoints. So one of the mistakes, and I had to throw this in here, is in earlier stages, when somebody gives us what they might sound like a very objective viewpoint, like they have their best interests in mind, might actually throw a wrench in your enthusiasm. And this can be negative because then we have to rebuild ourselves up again. Sometimes unenthusiastic people do this. They don't recognize that they're doing this a lot of times, and they're not being malicious, but it does happen. What's important is how you feel when you're around them. What you want to do is you want to be around enthusiastic people, because enthusiasm is contagious. When you're around people that are enthusiastic, you get excited. It stimulates certain creativity in certain aspects in your mind. So observe how you feel around certain people. Do they kill your enthusiasm? Enthusiasm is an important element of success. It's what's going to get you to drive yourself forward to do the very things that might not be very fascinating to you. It's going to allow you to look at things like failure and self-control as positive things. You're going to be excited about it. And anything you do with passion is going to be created even better than if you do it without passion or without enthusiasm. Also, learn to generate your enthusiasm from within. Learn to generate your enthusiasm from within. What this means is that you're not looking for external sources of stimulation and enthusiasm. While you do get it, and you want to, like I said, place yourself in places that provide you the enthusiasm, that provide you the stimulation, you also want to learn how to generate it from within, because there's going to be situations where you don't have access to certain people that give you a lot of enthusiasm, that make you feel great. And if you don't know how to generate it from within, you're going to become very reactive. You're going to start thinking very cynical, you're going to get negative, and you're going to lose your flow. Okay? Meditation has helped me with developing enthusiasm from within. Because when you're meditating, you're really going within yourself. And the more you do it, the more you'll recognize that right there evokes certain insights. And those insights are from within, which give you great joy and pleasure and excitement and enthusiasm towards the things that are happening in your life. You start to realize that you have control over things that you might not have thought you had control over before. Also, looking at certain situations which others might consider to be negative and finding enthusiasm in it is a skill that can be learned. It can be practiced. Doing things that stimulate enthusiasm is also very important. Okay, what are those things, being aware, that make you feel enthusiastic? We can get so caught up sometimes. I know sometimes I get like this, where I get so caught up in the day-to-day that I could lose my passion. I could lose my enthusiasm. It starts to go away. So what I've started to do as a preventive measure for that, to address that, is to rekindle the stimulation or rekindle the enthusiasm by recognizing what are the things that stimulate enthusiasm for me. For me, it's travel. For me, it's having certain kind of conversations with certain kinds of people, working out, running, different kinds of things that make me feel enthusiastic. Walking around, for example, certain kinds of water sports, they make me enthusiastic. They start to stimulate the enthusiasm, which then ends up stimulating everything else I need to do as far as my chief objective. So recognize what those things are for you and dedicating time towards doing those things. Govern where your attention goes. We're talking about self-control now. Govern where your attention goes before you become reactive. There is so much information being presented to us every day, especially now with technology. News, instant notifications. Everybody wants to get a hold of us, can get a hold of us. We might have like 5-6 different apps on our phone that allow us to get people to contact you. They can contact you on Skype, on WhatsApp, on Facebook, on Twitter. The list goes on and on and on and on. Many different ways for people to get in contact with you. And sometimes you can end up having the multiple different conversations with the same person on different apps. It's just too much information. We want to focus on signal versus the noise. We want to understand what contributes towards our chief aim. And we also have to recognize that everyone is trying to influence you. So that being said, we need to know where our attention goes, and we need to make sure that we have preemptively set up systems in our lives. Systems, okay? Because we can't rely too much on willpower. We've got to rely on systems that prevent our attention from going away from what is important from us. If your attention goes away, you train yourself to become reactive. You can always tell reactive people. Okay, next time you're in a public situation, public surrounding, observe people, and if there's a big noise or some kind of thing that is just useless, or some kind of distraction that's not really providing any value, look for the reactive ones. You'll see they're very reactive. A lot of times you'll find that those reactive people are running the many different apps on the phone. They're constantly bombarded by people that are trying to get their attention, and they're getting pulled in all kinds of different directions and different situations. When I'm having a conversation with someone, one of the things I'm observing is how reactive they are, because I could tell how much they have done with conscious effort to make sure that they're present and aware. And that, shows how much they value you. If I'm out and about with them and their attention is going on all kinds of different surroundings and they're not staying present to the conversation that we're having, chances are they're pretty reactive. And that reveals that they probably have a lot of other things in their life that they don't have control over. And, on the flip side, if you're doing it, other people can notice this in you too. So you want to govern where your attention goes. You also want to apply the highest and best use principle. Where is your time best spent? Okay? And then do those things that are going to give you the greatest output. There's a lot to this, but it's to get you thinking about if you can get started today and dedicate the rest of this week to focusing on highest and best use, you will develop your self-control. Chances are your results will start to go up also. Next, being sequential in your actions. You can do highest and best use, which means focusing on one thing at a time. Next would be sequential. Okay, what's the most important thing you should do right now? And then what's the next important thing? Focusing on one element at a time with presence of mind while being peripherally aware. Presence of mind while being peripherally aware, which can seem contradictory, but it's actually important that you know how to do both. Because although you want to keep your attention on one thing, you also want to be aware of your environment and your surroundings and the different elements, because then you're going to know what's coming up next. Or if you need to be course correcting. However, to develop this skill, we have to reduce the unnecessary distractions, because that's going to keep our awareness on what we're working on, what we're doing, and it's going to, because your peripheral vision can be developed, and so can your focus. But you want your peripheral to be on the elements of the environment that matter, the safety, the success elements that are within your awareness and your environment that you might not be focusing on right now, but you want to have that awareness. Next is to have the habit of doing more than paid for. Habit of doing more than paid for. Okay? This, again, is the investor mindset. Invest more in the right places, knowing that you're not going to necessarily get returns right now, but they're going to come as a result of the laws that state of the universe, that what you put out comes back to you. Okay? If you're not getting enough for yourself, most likely you're not doing enough. What we think is required to get that kind of return that we want is often underestimated. Often underestimated. A lot of times I talk to people and they're not getting the return that they want for their time and energy in their business, for example. And then I ask a handful of questions and I can, from there, realize that they're not giving as much as needs to be given. And it's usually a disconnect between what they think the volume is or the intensity is of what they need to do. Once you start to focus on the habit of doing more than paid for, you'll automatically cross the threshold, or you'll hit the equilibrium and surpass it, of when the returns start coming in great abundance. And then you'll realize that now I have a choice. I need to now multiply my value using my imagination, developing or applying self-control to focus on the highest and best use to do that with enthusiasm, to get more, to have more returns. Force multiplier effect. Okay, that's kind of the same as value multiplier thinking. Doing a bunch of things to multiply the effects. Multiply the effects. It's adjusting the attributes of what you're doing, so it has more of an effect of value creation. Okay? You can create something, and then you can multi-purpose that thing that you're creating. That's an example of force multiplier effect. You can distribute it further. These YouTube videos, for example, have a somewhat of a force multiplier effect. I communicate this once, as clear as I can, the best that I can, and then, many people will see it, will share it, and it'll be there every day for years, decades, or for life, for as long as YouTube stays around. And even then, I could share the videos with my clients, with others that I feel that can benefit from. One action creating multiple effects and intensity of effects, because every time I create one of these videos, I try to improve on. So there's many elements that make this kind of video more impactful. What I'm interested in is creating behavioral change in you. I'm not trying to tell you these things because I want to lecture you. I would like that when you watch these videos, I have communicated in a way that actually changes your behavior, that helps you get the success that you want. In addition to reading the books. When you do that, I actually impact you to create further output. I'm actually multiplying even further the effect of this. And that is an example, maybe one you've never thought of before, of doing more than what I'm paid for. Develop a pleasing personality. Okay? Accepting responsibility, being the kind of person that accepts responsibility for a relationship or friendship or business connection and so forth, is a vibe that you give out. You give off a certain vibe, and people like that. They feel safe around you. They feel calm. They feel comfortable, and they can feel like they can be themselves around you. Otherwise, if you don't accept responsibility, people are going to put on an act around you, and you're not going to see the real side of them. Bring the energy. Be the one that brings the vibe. Don't go into interaction looking to take. Be the giver of energy. If you're the kind of person that's taking, people are going to eventually not want to be around you. If you're the bringer of energy, people are going to want to be around you. And remember, energy or value is what the other person considers to be energy and value. But for the most part, it's good vibes. If you can make somebody feel good through your personality, through your communication, through your conversation, then you're on the right track. I like this. Let the thought you are provoking come to them as if it was their own, which was from The Art of Seduction. A lot of times we like to tell people what to do, instead of trying to facilitate certain thoughts in their mind that they wanted to have. You know you're doing the right thing if you're communicating in a way where people feel that you're not telling them something new, but you're helping bring more awareness and focus on the important elements to them that they already knew. That's one way of doing it. If you lecture people and you tell people what to do, it results in resistance. Any types of behavioral change that we want to achieve. Remember, the aim is, when we're communicating, is we want behavioral change. That's how real persuasion works. And we do that by allowing them to come up to conclusions on their own. And this is done with our pleasing personality, an accepting responsibility vibe, bringing the energy vibe. Because when you're around somebody that accepts responsibility, you feel good around them, like I mentioned, and you bring the good energy, they're going to be more receptive to what you have to say. And again, you're not saying things because you want to control them, but because you want to create value in them based on what they consider to be value. Accurate thoughts, clarity of intent. One of the reasons why you want to have a definite chief aim and you want to stick with it is because of clarity of intent. Clarity of intent. You develop that by being clear as to what you want. And then you can clearly communicate that to a win-win scenario for others, clearly, in a way that they understand and they want to participate in. Otherwise, you're playing games. And, playing games is just a waste of time nowadays, because at the end of the day, there's far more access to people that want what you have than has ever been before with the internet. Back in the days in small communities and stuff, they had to play games. They had to do these political games because that's the only way that they would get their message across, because you were dealing with all kinds of people that didn't see things your way and you saw something that was greater benefit and so forth. But now, in order to be able to create what you want, provided it comes from a good place and it benefits others, there's more people out there that want to participate with you on that journey than you can access, that you could ever spend time with. And that starts with clarity of intent, because then you're able to filter the kind of people you want to talk to. You can realize where they are, how they communicate, the kind of things that really help you engage with them to evoke the meaningful mastermind connections and so forth. Mind control. Okay? Controlling your mind. If you don't control your mind, someone else will control it for you. And a lot of times it's not going to be in the direction that you want, and you're not going to feel good in the end. Learning how to place yourself in situations where you have control over your mind. Remember, your mind, your attention is one of the most valuable resources that exists on this planet. Okay? Pretty much all business is based on getting attention. Okay? When someone's trying to sell something, they take your attention away from what you're doing and place it onto their marketing or their sales process. And if it's not towards your benefit, then you've kind of wasted your time. Now, people are getting very good at learning how to control your mind, because that's where the value is. And while that's happening, you've got to understand what they're doing, and you've got to learn how to take the control back in your hands onto what's important for you. Otherwise, you're going to be taken advantage of. Being able to entertain two separate and polarizing thoughts in your mind while maintaining focus, presence, and warmth. What does this mean? You see, accurate thinking thoughts that are clear, that evoke insight, that can bring you into areas where you can understand what you don't know that you don't know, requires you to keep an open mind while being clear and focused, okay? Which are in itself two separate polarizing thoughts, okay? One is being totally open, and one is being totally specific. What people do is they try to lean onto one side or the other. But as you evolve in this journey, you'll be able to manage both of these polarizing thoughts in your mind at the same time. That's going to give you a higher level of confidence. I can always tell when somebody has a high level of confidence when they're not offended by what someone has to say to them, if it's not what they agree upon. Instead, they entertain the idea. They look to see where that person could be right. They seek first to understand before to be understood. And they do it with presence and warmth and openness. And guess what that does? Well, that develops a pleasing personality. And what is it about pleasing personality that's so powerful? Well, people will start to listen to you. And that's why the Stephen R. Covey quote, "Seek first to understand, then to be understood," is so powerful. I recommend you watch my video on that when I did 7 Habits. Number 12, concentration. Focus on one task at a time with presence and awareness. I really believe that concentration is one of the key currencies of today's world. Okay? That's where the most value is, I believe. In your ability to concentrate onto the elements and the high macro level of your chief aim, the concentration of it. Focusing on one task at a time, because that way all the noise doesn't hit your awareness. All the things that don't matter don't hit your awareness. Understanding how to place yourself in flow state. Watch my video on flow by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. Flow state is essentially a highly focused state where challenge meets skill. Challenge meets skill. And being aware what is distracting you, tracking it back, or tracking the distractions to the why. Tracking distractions to the why. We get distracted. We can get distracted many times in a day. A lot of times we don't even recognize we're being distracted until we're way off course. Well, if you can become conscious and aware of where you're being distracted, that is one benefit. A greater benefit is to know why you're being distracted. There's reasons why you're being distracted. And by the way, this is where the marketers and those that are trying to get your attention and awareness away from what you're doing are focusing on. What you see is not always what is deeply connected to the persuasion that's going on. And what I recommend that you do is really study Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion by Robert Cialdini. Study that book inside out, watch my videos on it, and understand the core elements of persuasion. And that's going to give you a lot of insight as to why you're being distracted. If you can see why you're being distracted, then you can rewrite those stories. You can be conscious and aware. And these are very powerful triggers. Okay? It takes a lot of effort and energy, but it's well worth it to develop the ability to not be persuaded by them. To have that kind of critical thinking when your critical thinking is bypassed by these emotional triggers. Remember the one thing that they teach all sales and marketing people, AIDA, attention, interest, decision, action. Okay? They try to get your attention. They hold on to your attention and get your interest, get you to decide on a response, which a lot of times they predetermine that they want you to take, and then you take action, and before you know it, it could be off course. Now, on the flip side, there's also benefits to this, right? This is how you become aware of what you don't know that you don't know. That's why it's important to be able to hold two polarizing thoughts in your mind. Being able to understand clarity of intent and being specific is important. However, being open-minded is also important. Now, this comes with practice of doing all these 16 lessons. So if you don't have the high ability right now, understand that progressive overload, as I mentioned, and recognizing that every day you're going to get better and you're going to develop these abilities. Because these abilities that I'm talking about right here, these are high-level abilities that are very easy for people that are at a high level of success in whatever their chosen area is. But they didn't get there overnight. They developed it. And no matter where you are in the journey, you can develop it even more, including them. Next is cooperation. Win, 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 or walk. So I thought about this yesterday. Win, 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 or walk. What does this mean? Normally you hear win, win. Win is when you're dealing with somebody, no matter what context it is, you're winning from the deal, they're winning from the deal, and the higher purpose is winning from the deal also. Or you walk away. No deal. Win-win, you could win and you could do a deal with someone where you both win, but the long-term implications could mess up either the environment or society or people around you, or end you in a certain situation that's not desirable. For example, you could do an unethical win-win between two parties that could end you up in jail. Or you could do a win-win collaboration and mastermind resulting in a big loss in the end because you didn't realize the long-term implications. Now, in order to really understand the third win, you've got to practice all these kind of things, because then you get better at seeing the long-term implications. What might seem like a win-win on the surface might actually be a win-win-lose in the long term. Now, I try to make sure that whatever deal I'm doing with a person, all three are in place, or I'm not doing the deal. I'm just not doing it. Because, as I mentioned earlier, and I mentioned in all my videos, there's far more opportunity nowadays than ever before because of the internet. There's no reason why we have to settle. especially when all this information is so freely available. It just takes focus and presence to dedicate yourself to sit down and really understand what it is that you want and how you can get the specific elements that help you get what you want. Why would you settle? Why would you go for a win-lose or a win-lose-lose or win-win-lose when you can go for a win-win-win? Cooperation also is understanding how it is a system problem, not a people problem. This is especially important in business. A lot of times when things don't go the right way, people tend to blame their staff or blame all kinds of situations rather than looking at the system that they have created without even them knowing. Every business operates with a system. Either it's a conscious system or it's a half-assed system that is not really identified of how it is a system. And that's a problem if that's the case. Because then, if you don't know and recognize the system and you haven't identified it and you haven't figured out what the strengths and weaknesses are of the system, then it's going to break a lot. And the default is to blame people because it's easier to blame people than to take responsibility, right? Leadership, as we go earlier, is not as easy as it sounds. Just because you have a title doesn't make you a leader. Just because you give yourself the badge of CEO or whatever doesn't mean that you are a leader. You might fool a bunch of people when you consider yourself to be a manager or CEO or president or whatever. You might impress a bunch of people like that, but you won't impress the people that are really down the path of mastery in these areas because they can see through your title and they're not interested in your title. They're watching what you do. Okay? And one of the important elements of that is what they're looking for is, do you look at it as a system problem, as in it's not this person's problem or it's not this person's fault, it's the system I have in place. How can I put a system in place that brings out the best in that person? Or if it's not possible, replace that person because they're not part of the system, right? Instead of blaming in the sense where it's like, well, it's just this person's fault and that's it. Next is understanding the difference between interdependent versus dependent and independent. I try to work with I choose to work only and exclusively with interdependent people. Because if I work with a dependent person, then they're always going to rely upon me if I'm the one with all the strengths. And if things don't go their way, then they're going to blame me. They're essentially going to do this thing where it's not a systems problem, but it's a people problem. If I work with someone who's independent, then they're only looking at for their best interests. And they're standoffish and they're not open. And I could feel it. If I work with someone that's interdependent, then they are dependent on the group collaborative or the agreements, but if it doesn't go their way, they can become independent on that element and they can make up for it, or they can go elsewhere. If they're interdependent, they come in with a detached vibe that is fully present and aware. Again, polarizing thoughts. Through this interdependence, something interesting happens. We cut through the nonsense. We can be clear with each other. It's not like walking on eggshells when you're communicating. And you both have visions, clear-cut visions as to what you want. And you recognize that the interaction, the relationship, the business dealing is moving you both towards the goals that you want. It's win-win-win. Okay? Next is failure. Understanding the value of failure. Failing forward rapidly. Okay? Choosing to fail forward rapidly means taking action and recognizing that you're not always going to be optimal, but you're going to fail your way forward. You know, in my videos, I make a lot of mistakes, probably a lot of grammar mistakes, spelling mistakes, a lot of, after I recorded, I recognized I could have said something even better, more eloquently, more persuasive, and so forth. But if I note these things and make improvement, then I'm going to be far further than if I was trying to overanalyze everything and didn't even take any action. A lot of people mistaken perfectionism with effectiveness. Okay, people who are perfectionists a lot of times take far less action because they want to be perfect. They see far less things into entering the marketplace, for example, in business, because they want to look cool. They want to try to get everything to look perfect. They're not essentially applying this principle of failing forward rapidly because they fail to recognize, no pun intended, that when you fail forward, what happens is you get far more objective data. You get far more objective data than your theories. A lot of times our theories are wrong. Okay, a lot of times our theories are wrong. When you take action, you start to see the results from it, and then you can say, well, a bunch of those theories were wrong and some of them were right. And you can communicate based on it moving forward with your team and so forth. But the key really is failing forward rapidly. Next is systems-based thinking. Again, I mentioned focusing on the system rather than the people. Okay, there are some environments that you go to that have amazing systems that give the representation where, Starbucks is a great example. They have this certain kind of vibe, and they've done a great job considering it's this massive company. There's a lot of locations to maintain a very good personal touch that's very close to a small cafe. Is it exactly like a small mom and pop cafe? No, there's a lot of differences. But they've done a great job considering that they maintain that level of touch using systems. Essentially, they get the people that work there, the baristas, to perform in a way where it's as individualized as they can get it based on their current level of understanding. But it's really because the barista is following a system. The reason why they're able to do this and scale so well is because they focus on the system, right? They have systems-based thinking. They look where the system fails, and then they optimize the system. Reassociate your feelings and meanings in relation to failure. Failure is a good thing. Failure allows you to achieve success faster. There's tons of information now on how failure is actually a good thing. And a lot of the stories we tell ourselves about failure are negative, and we can rewrite those stories. Next is tolerance. So I like this one because those that have the great ability to be tolerant towards things and stay with the pain for an extended period of time eventually break through. And just by staying in it longer, a lot of people just kind of leave the race because they can't handle it. One of the keys for success in business, now that I recognize this, being self-employed and on entrepreneurship for 8 years now, is just staying in it longer. That's it. Just weathering the storm, staying in it longer. Because you get then insights that other people will not get just based on the longevity. Just from doing it every day and staying and going through the ups and downs and pains, you start to figure things out. You have to make a commitment to yourself that if you want to achieve your definite chief aim, that you're willing to be with it for the long term. I believe for myself, and this is how I've always done it, when I put my mind to something, I'm going to stick with it all the way, as long as it takes. Okay, my entire life, I'm going to stick with it till I accomplish it. Till I accomplish it. So, Robert Greene talks about in the 33 Strategies of War, the controlled chaos strategy. So I want to read you the quote from the book, Robert Greene's book. The critical elements in war are speed and adaptability, the ability to move and make decisions faster than the enemy. Break your forces into independent groups that can operate on their own. Give them the spirit of the campaign, a mission to accomplish, and room to run. Now, this might appear to be a quote on the surface, and it really is a quote about divide and conquer strategy or building teams and so forth. But in its essence, at a higher level, it's what we call controlled chaos. Okay? Controlled chaos. Each of these groups or each of the things that you do requires skills. And in order to develop those skills, you kind of have to place yourself in chaotic situations where you don't know where you don't know. And in business, for example, it could be doing sales. It could be trying to tap into a new market, trying to ad that you're running. You don't know how it's going to work, but it's essentially controlled chaos because you have your finger on the pulse of the data and the metrics. So in the context of this, for example, how it was referred to in the book of 33 Strategies of War, he's really talking about building speed and adaptability and the ability to move and make decisions faster. Okay, having that ability is by putting not only in yourself, but your team into controlled chaos situations where they can learn how to develop adaptability. You can develop adaptability by removing yourself from where you are right now, flying to another country where you don't know anyone, and then figure it out from there. That's a controlled chaos strategy, because what's the worst that can come out of it, provided it's a safe country, right? Nothing really bad can come out with it. Well, what are the positive aspects from it? You'll gain tolerance. You'll learn how to figure out things. You'll be able to act quick, think in the moment. So there's a lot of deep elements when it comes to the controlled chaos strategy. It's the first thing that I thought in mind when I thought of tolerance. I try to put myself in as much controlled chaos strategy. Now, I don't get myself in just a chaos strategy. Controlled chaos. I need to know what it is that I'm developing, what skill set, what are my outcomes as a result of this particular controlled chaos strategy prior to putting myself in it and then placing myself in it, because I know that the reason why I'm doing it is because I'm going to develop certain skill sets. If you don't put yourself in controlled chaos strategies, you're not going to learn what you don't know that you don't know. And, I mentioned this many times in this video. What you don't know that you don't know. There's a reason why. Because that's where the power is. That's where the results is. And that's found in your ability to tolerate things. Okay? Willpower, ability to tolerate certain kinds of pain. A lot of people try to avoid pain. And a lot of spiritual texts will talk about this. The results you want in life is found in the pain. Okay? Reassociating pain into pleasure is very important. Not all pain, because some pain is valid, but the pain that you're experiencing that you need to break through, that you need to transcend, because it's required to help you hit your definite chief aim. And like I said, staying power, staying in it for the long term. Next is the golden rule. We all know the golden rule. Do unto others as you wish they do unto you. So what are some elements related to that have provoked insights that I want to share with you? Number one is to teach others to understand and not to lecture or gratify your ego. So one of the things that I've learned as I've developed myself as a teacher to be, one that educates businesses and trains people on certain elements of business, making these YouTube videos and so forth, is in earlier stages, I did it because I wanted validation. I wanted, recognition and validation. And for the most part, it came from a good place. But the dark side to that is if you do get it and you haven't really realized the importance of why teaching exists in the first place, you might just gratify your ego, and you might just build an overly inflated ego, and then your teaching style will start to deteriorate, and you'll create all kinds of unnecessary resistance where you'll just be lecturing people and telling people what to do, but you won't actually be creating behavioral change in people. So there's a lot of teachers out there like this. They'll lecture, but they don't actually produce the results from their lectures. That's because they don't communicate with the students. They don't understand the cybernetic loop, where the student is the teacher and the teacher is the student. Okay? When I make these videos, I communicate them as if I was communicating them to myself. And I'm also making sure that when I communicate the messages in here, I'm communicating in a way that creates behavioral change in others, but helps me understand this message and also understand, while I'm communicating this, of all the sub areas that I don't know. So I can essentially mirror the same passion of the student with the student that's listening. You follow me with that? If you want to persuade others, then you have to mirror them. This is an NLP concept. One of the best ways to mirror somebody is to feel like you are them, like you're one with them. I'm very much a student to this information, and all I'm doing is merely just presenting my insights. And that's the perspective. I get excited. I dedicate a couple weeks per book to really reflect upon the information and observe it within my awareness and so forth, and share my insights based on it. but it's really to understand the content myself as much as I would like you to understand the content, rather than to say that I know what I'm talking about, because the truth is I don't know what I'm talking about. I know some of these things, and if I reread this book again in a year from now, by applying all these principles here, I'm going to know it even more. A lot of these insights are going to be maybe different. Some of them will be more expanded and more granular. Some of them might be shared from different perspectives and so forth, but that's how it is. And then, I mentioned this earlier, knowing the short-term and long-term implications of what you do to anyone. And the reason why I want to conclude on that is because pretty much all our success in life is going to come as a result of the value we create for others. The value we create for others. And what we want to do is we want to have this be a long-term deal. Okay, we want continuing success that is going to incrementally increase every day, give us some quantum leaps every now and then, and we want to do this for the rest of our lives. Okay, we don't, those of you that watch my videos, watching it for a long time, you know that I don't consider what I do as far as business as something that I do and that one day I'm going to retire from doing. I'm planning on doing this forever because I get a lot of passion out of this. And, based on that, I communicate from that perspective. And my assumption is that a lot of people that watch my videos feel the same way, right? What they do is they want to learn this information because they want this to be their life. They want a meaningful life, one where they can create a lot of value for themselves and people that they care about and contribute a lot, right? And as you're doing that, the recognition of the long-term implications of everything you do is very important. And the short-term, right? What you do for anyone. Because a lot of this information is very powerful. And you could use it for good, and you could use it for not good things. But there's always cause and effect. As you sow, you shall reap. So when you create value that's going to benefit somebody in the short term and long term, you're multiplying the value that you put out. And like I mentioned this before, the more value you put out, the more it comes back to you. So these principles right here are very important and are worth really studying deeply over and over again at different points in whatever area that you choose to develop in. And then when you do that, you get better and better and better at gaining mastery in your specific chosen skill. Because like I said, there are the skills required that you have to develop for whatever it is you want to get success in. And then there are these principles in the background, the meta principles that propel you forward if you want to increase your success. And there's no limit to how much you can develop them. And you know you're on the right path if you are constantly working on them and you're getting more and more insights on a daily basis on these particular areas. And as simple and as obvious as they sound, one of the biases that we have when we're learning something is we say, yeah, I already knew that. Well, the truth is that you might know something theoretically, but if you're not applying it, then you don't really understand it. And if you are applying it, then you can understand it even more if you implement it even more with greater detail, with greater awareness in many different areas of your life. Because one of my favorite sayings is how you do one thing is how you do everything. Hope you enjoyed this video. Copy of this mind map is in the link in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.